Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. This week we are touching on that very thorny topic, how to raise your fees without your clients batting an eyelid. Obviously, trying to get any form of data on this is quite difficult, but I did have a look. The typical percentage of the employee's first year's salary that a recruitment agencies typically charge are anywhere between 15 and 25%. So anything north of 25%, you're doing extremely well. Anything lower than 15%, you need to question sort of what market you're sort of really working in and are you actually adding value to your client. The median annual earning in the UK is £34,963 in year 2023. So annual earnings varied depending on region, with London having the highest at 44,370, and then down to 31,200 in the northeast, meaning the lowest point of the average fee would mean that the UK base fee should be 5,244 at 15%, and in London that would be £6,655. However, in the northeast, it would drop to £4,680. So, is your average fee above where your geographical area is, above the UK norm, or above where the London area is? A McKinsey report found that superior talent is up to 8 times more effective, and in more complex roles creates a wider gap between employable status but in salary as well. And estimating the cost of recruitment varied widely, and according to the CIPD, the average cost to fill a vacancy, including labour costs, is £6,125, and for a manager role that can rise up to £19,000. This week the whole of Jump is here, which is great to see. Welcome all of you. Happy New Year to those that weren't here last week. Dave and I was manning the fort last week. Got loads and loads of questions. So let's jump in. Okay, so in your experience, what common challenges do recruiters face when it comes to fee negotiation, and how can they overcome these challenges effectively?
Okay, I'll kick it off. I think the word is fear. People are very nervous and anxious about approaching clients about fee negotiations, increasing charges, and so forth, particularly. And I think it's understandable when times are more challenging, as they have been in many respects over the last 15 months. I think it comes down to the concern that it becomes a conversation that's based around potential conflict. And in my experience, most people avoid those kind of conversations. So it's often the case that people, just as it says, you've got there on the screen, it's kind of turning the other cheek. I'm trying very hard not to get involved in those conversations. Better that you have some business than none. So I think fear is the key point. The issue, of course, is that we have to increase our charges. We have to be very much on top of our fee levels because our expenses, our costs are always increasing. They never go down. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about this. It's also about ensuring that you create some distance between yourself and your competitors by expressing value. And therefore, it can't be necessarily the same fee levels as everybody else. You have to be looking to see whether you can move yourself into a premium position. So I would say, just to finish off, it is fear. That's the biggest issue. People avoid having these difficult and challenging conversations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Having a difficult conversation is difficult, right? People don't want to have difficult conversations. And too often, I think we still are in a situation where working with a recruitment business is a grudge purchase, that we perhaps don't have the relationship with our clients that we think we have. And so we are afraid that we won't get the business if we move it forward. And so I think you really have to equip your consultants with the confidence in themselves, in the product, and in the relationship with the client, and the skills of what do they say, rehearsing those conversations, giving them the skills, the overcoming objections. It's all a classic part of a salesperson's training, but sometimes we miss it in the context of putting fees up. So, you know, the skills to do it and rehearsing what the objections might be, because actually very often it's not as bad as we think it's going to be, as with all difficult conversations, but we do need to give people the skills to do it.
And it's interesting, Heather, because I've written down here before you said what you said, confidence and not believing in yourself.
Yeah.
I think often we feel that we're subservient to the client.
Yeah.
The client is the big client and he or she has a much bigger job than we have because we're just a consultant or just a manager in a recruitment industry that sometimes isn't given the reputation and the value that I think we deserve and have. And I think if you enter into the negotiations feeling a little bit less, a little bit second best, then that negotiation is going to be really tough. And to your point, it's about rehearsing as well. It's about having the conversation with your colleague next to you first and seeing how things go. When you do that, they very rarely go the way you've rehearsed, but you just feel that little bit more confident.
Gives you the confidence, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and if I can do it, and you have a bit of a joke, maybe even it's a serious thing, but it's about practice and it's about believing that you are equal to the person you're speaking to. If not, better, because you've got the solution that they need.
So I'm going to pick up on 2 points there. First point was Heather agreeing with Paul. I know it's a new year, but it's good to see it. It's
New
good
Year's
to see
resolution. Yeah, it's working.
And secondly, David's doing this webinar from his son's school, and it's nice to see he's actually writing things down. So that, there's 2 good points there. So
nice points, Howard.
So he has to. He'll be put in detention otherwise.
Correct.
So I think she's walking past, looking who's in the physics lab. I've got people running past.
Did anyone know that ball boys? Anyway, so I think we're exactly right. What we're talking about is that lack of fear, lack of confidence in their products, and lack of training in actually delivering what they're trying to deliver. And I think most of the fear is the fact that you're probably competing against multiple agencies. You fear that the client doesn't see the value because you're offering probably bog standard services. And that's the bit. We've got to build better service offerings, develop training to equip our teams to actually sell to that. And I think we've got to stop settling for mediocre services and sales platforms. We've got to get out and visit our clients, find out what they actually want and what they need from a recruiter. Then we can build bespoke services, and then the client can actually feel and see the value that we actually provide. And I think it's the fear of that is that we don't want to do that because we fear of being rejected. We put the client, as I think Paul said, up on a pedestal. And I think we start to look at that. And a lot of recruitment agencies will fight back and say, my services are brilliant, etc. And I think the quickest way to put that to the acid test is how many unsolicited testimonials do you get from your clients? Yes, we all get lots of testimonials, but we normally ask for those testimonials. When was the last time a client wrote in and said something really nice about your services? So that says that if we are fearing what the client, because we put the client on a pedestal, it means that we're not confident in our products. Our products are bog standard with every other recruitment agency, and our clients doesn't see the value in what they're doing, and therefore we worry about actually putting the prices up because they don't see the value. I think the better way of looking at that is then how do you strike a balance between demonstrating the unique value your agency provides and remaining competitive in a market where the clients may be, and certainly in this market, very fee sensitive?
I mean, I think you've kind of answered it in your last comment, Howard. I think you've got to separate yourselves from your competitors. You should look at it from the client's perspective. If your service appears in every respect to be identical to everybody else's, why would they pay you more money? And if I was in that position and I could see absolutely no differentials in the service from the particular recruitment business that was asking me for an increase in fees against their competitors, why would I agree to it? I wouldn't. It's just, you're doing the same thing. You're even sending me duplicated CVs. Why on earth would I give you more money for what I perceive to be exactly the same or even a worse service than anyone else? The only answer to this is what you kind of talked about just then, Howard, which is that you've got to be able to provide evidence that you're providing a better service. And the only way you're going to get into that position of being able to give added value is to be super tight to your clients, to understand what their needs are, and be working tirelessly to invent services, to provide support in areas that sit to a degree, although aligned, but to a degree sit alongside providing candidates. You have to give added value. If you provide added value, and I think we can see this in every walk of life, let alone in recruitment, people are always prepared to pay extra for what they perceive to be better quality services or better quality product. We all do that, but it has to be very tangible. If it's not there, then there's no way that you can ask for more money. So this really doesn't come down to a fee objection. I think it's important to make that point. It's not about are people prepared to spend more money? They will always spend more money on services or products that they perceive to offer better value than the other products on the market. How you position yourself to be able to justify that is the key point.
It's really interesting. There's a fantastic book about this as part of the Miller Hyman collection that really talks about that step ladder in your relationship with your clients.
Yep.
So at the beginning, where you have a transactional relationship with your client, it is always going to be price sensitive because it's a transactional relationship. And books, if anybody wants the details of the book, I'll happily send it to you. But it really talks about how you step your relationship with the client up to the point at which you are a genuine partner. And we've talked about this before in other webinars about having this genuine partnership with your clients and being consultative with them and being specialists and experts. And this book talks about how you step your relationship up so that you become an organization where price doesn't matter. Yeah. Because that's not the relationship you have with them. And so, our goal in deepening our relationships with the clients is to move us away from being price sensitive, Paul, and into being close to and valued in a partnership sense, so that the price that we put it on isn't the reason they're making a decision to work with us.
And this is now the second time, note, Howard, that I'm agreeing or we agree with each other, because I just to agree with you on this point, I am actually Miller Hyman trained. I just thought I'd mention that to you. There you go. So there you go. So we share that.
I think I was on that course as well, Paul.
I think if I recall, I made you go on that course because you were lousy at negotiating.
I don't believe you had any jurisdiction over my capabilities at all.
But the thing is, for many of us, when we're negotiating fee, a lot of the time it's the first time. We're talking about business development in this series. A lot of our consultants are trying to get new business from new clients. So we don't have any history. There isn't any unique value perceived by the client. We are just another agency with just another candidate. And our job is to try to get some chemistry with the client, so we can understand a little bit about what they need and why hiring this person matters. But remember, when you're talking about fees, if the fee is immovable, if the client won't move on the fees, there are other things that you could talk about, like payment terms, like can you pay the fee over a period of time, or you could discuss rebate or something like that. There are other things that you can do if the fee is something that's immovable and if you don't have any relationship, because it is a brand new client that you want to do really well with. I've got a client that we work with that has so long wanted to get into McLaren because what they do in engineering, and it's a great brand, but the fees were really, really low. So they had to come up with another way of making sure that they were able to service McLaren, but not at a cost to them.
It's interesting because I've also worked with the McLaren, Dave, as well, and their fees were reasonably high when we worked with them because it was about the value. And I think value trumps the conversation on price. And they perceive, if they see value, they'll take value. And I think if your client values your services or doesn't value your service, and I think what you two have been talking about there, it's because we need to change their perception of recruitment and how they see us. We always see a client as a prospect and we're working with them as a prospect. They tend not to see us as a prospect. So the more we get them to see us as a prospect and them to work as a prospect, then price doesn't become the issue. And I think then we need to remain competitive and understand firstly your client needs. And then once you understand what your competition is doing, then you can start to look at the services that you can introduce. So irrespective of being internal, external, electronic, or whatever else coming down the line from a recruitment point of view that's going to compete against us, we have to remain relevant. And I think we've got to adapt in order to prosper. And I think that's the problem with most recruitment agencies. Don't adapt quick enough. We don't change our services often enough. We don't change our prices based on value. And we went for a lovely Christmas meal. If you think about that, we went for a lovely Christmas deal in the Ivory in Birmingham. Paul, you and I had fish and chips. That fish and chips cost us 25 quid a head. We could have walked around the corners to the fish and chip shop and got the same fish and chips at £10. What's the difference in the £15? The difference is in the service and the way that you've been made to feel when you walked into the Ivy. And that is what we're talking about, the service that we provide to our clients and the perception they have of our quality and our value. We need to change that perception. And therefore, we need to sort of think about how we do that in order to prosper and grow our market share and increase our value share to our clients. And once we increase our value share, then price doesn't become a question, does it?
The big difference, Howard, was if you'd gone round the corner, you wouldn't have the pleasure of Heather and my company, and that's worth at least 15 quid a head.
Indeed. So let's move that on then. So can you then share specific examples of where data has played a crucial role in justifying and successfully increasing recruitment fees, and sort of what metrics or insights were particularly persuasive that you use to get that client to increase your fees?
I think if anyone has had the deep pleasure of responding to a tender in the last few years, well, they'll know very clearly that clients are not just asking any longer for information on how you're going to provide candidates. They're digging in deep. They're asking questions about your attitudes towards sustainability, DE&i, and so forth. And a failure to be able to provide evidence that you are all over these particular subject matters will preclude you from being advanced in the process. It's been evident for some years now that clients want information. They don't just want you to provide candidates. They want you to be able to provide knowledge and expertise. And they also want to feel that your values and behaviors are aligned with theirs, particularly the large corporations. One of my clients, God bless him, has just won the back end of last year, the Recruiter Startup of the Year award, which is fantastic. And his entire premise, and it's a finance recruitment business, is based around sustainability and giving back and so forth. This is something he absolutely believes in. And his clients, the new clients that he's now working with, is less than 2 years old as a business, are very bought into what he believes in. They believe in what he believes in. And he's now also got accreditation, B Corp accreditation, which is phenomenal. It's just evidence, I think, as an example of what it takes these days to make a big impression with clients. By the way, he's also able to offer premium fees because they perceive his business as being worth it. Obviously, looking at the other things that I think you really need, and this has been the same for many, many years, certainly when I was head of business development back in the day at Adecco and Office Angels and running Office Angels, was the management information. People want management information. When you rock up to meetings, they expect you to know your stuff, and they expect you to understand what the ratios have been over the last 2-3 months, and where the spend has been made and who's been spending, and a whole range of other statistics. They also want, and everyone knows this, salary survey information and things on benefits and so forth. I mean, the more you talk about this particular subject, the more it makes you aware that it isn't just about providing excellent candidates. You have to really know your stuff and understand the sectors that your clients are involved in, the trends, and be very aware of the information that they need to help them support their manpower plans.
Just to be slightly controversial here, do we sometimes overthink this? And actually, we just assume that people are going to object to a margin increase, for example, on a decent sized temp book, when in fact everybody knows that everybody's costs have gone up. And actually, the only data we need to do is to just put in some rationale as to why we're putting.
Well, you make a great point. Absolutely.
Just to play devil's advocate, sometimes I think we overthink this. Actually, with a lot of clients, we're not going to get the resistance we think we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think those decisions, Heather, as long as we arm the client with data,
Yeah.
I think we have to help them come around to our way of thinking if we have to make if we have to do increases. I think one of the key things is when you take a requirement, that's one of my key pieces of data, is how long has it been on the website? How many agencies are you dealing with? How long has it been open? And you can see that today. You can find that information out as you take the requirement. And I would say, don't work on stuff that the client isn't going to value your service. So if the client is dealing with 15 agencies and the job's been open for 6 or 7 weeks, and you may be sitting there listening to this thinking, well, that's obvious, but I need the work. But your chances of success in that work are minimal versus where you could be pointing the direction at something that could be a bit more successful. So I would find out your own data as well. You know, how long has it been open? The usual stuff. We all know it, but sometimes we forget. And we forget sometimes that most of the people that work in our businesses are younger people. And they haven't had that experience, and this is not. So it's about training them. It's about leadership. It's about arming them with those sort of questions.
Well, actually, can I just jump in very quickly, Dave, and just make a point that, and this came up last week with one of my clients. You make a great point. People do need to be trained, but I actually, and I'm sure you do too, see in some recruitment businesses, new people, rookies you might call them, being enabled to negotiate fees. And I've always said that you should not allow that to happen, ever. I mean, it's only at the point at which you are absolutely confident that the people working for you, the person working for you has reached a level of competence that you should allow them to negotiate. In fact, frankly, from a brand new consultant's perspective, to be able to say to a client, I am sorry, I'm unfortunately not allowed to negotiate this. I have to speak to my boss, is something that actually is a release for them. They don't want to be involved. And frankly, I don't think we should be enabling people who are less experienced or lack experience, I should say, to get involved in those conversations. It can only go wrong. There's only one way this is going to go.
Can we play
that, Paul,
spot the consultant who hasn't read ahead on Howard's questions?
Yes, correct. Well done, Heather. I didn't want to say anything, Heather, but yes, as usual, Mr. Jacobs is never.
Well, you know, I mean, we don't rehearse these things, you know that.
Correct. You know, it shows, Paul. It genuinely shows. Thanks for that. I think what we're saying is that, you know, some of the key data that I use constantly is the time to fill.
Yeah.
And I take the time to fill from the Office of National Statistics. This is the average time that the UK is trying to fill a type of role. I look at the data that then is based on the amount of time the candidates are actually on the marketplace. And then using my own data that's come from my CRM, I look at the time it takes for my client to fill the job and then their key competitors. And so I can gauge whether or not it's a client worth working with, but I can also then go to the client and start to say, well, actually, you take 2 weeks longer than this client to fill. You take 3 weeks longer than this, or you're the quickest at this, et cetera, et cetera. And you can start to identify bottlenecks in their recruitment process, which means that when you start to talk about the quality of your recruitment service and the return on their investment, they can see where it's coming from. And that's without even talking about the quality of the candidates that you can produce for them. It's looking at how you can increase their capabilities of getting the candidates from or to the end of the process. And obviously, if you can then demonstrate that your capability of filling, so what is your fill ratios, then it has a very different conversation. It's interesting. I work with a client down in the South Midlands, and they have a 93% fill ratio. And that's the first thing they state to their clients, that they have a 93% fill ratio, and they refuse point blank to work on any roles that they do not think that they can fill, or they do not think that the client is fully engaged in the role.
That's admirable. That's very good.
And they walk away, and they're making placements galore because they are always working on roles that they only ever want to fill. And when the clients talk to them about what they are doing, the clients see the value, understand what's being perceived, and therefore they are more likely to negotiate and change their recruitment processes to adapt, because these guys are proving their success week in, week out, etc. And they prove it by walking away. So when it comes to aligning agency fees with client expectations, what strategies have you found most effective in ensuring your clients perceive genuine value in the services that you provide?
It's pretty straightforward. You have to know what clients want. You know, how many times do you attend meetings, strategy meetings with people? And there's always a lot of great ideas in those conversations, but it's internalizing. You know, we don't sit down in front of our customers as regularly as we should do to truly understand what they want. You know, what we think they want is one thing, what they actually want may be entirely different. And in the end, the way you're going to mold your business to be able to give some distance between yourself and your competitors and be in a position perhaps to get better fees without pushback is to be consistently sitting in front of clients, asking them what they want aside from great candidates. And I mean, it's not that difficult. People want support. We live in a very ever-changing landscape. Things move at a rapid pace, and people have real challenges from an HR perspective these days. Understanding what those challenges are and walking away and trying to think of solutions to those challenges is the cause of separation. And you need to see people. I always say to every consultant I've ever trained, never go more than 3 months without sitting down in front of clients. But that doesn't happen as regularly as it should do. And in many instances, we find clients are never seen, or they're seen once a year if perhaps that happens. It's simply not good enough. We need to be in front, acting as true consultants in order to understand what it is they want rather than imagine what they want.
Oh, definitely quiet.
Definitely quiet. They don't tell me everybody's understood.
Well, no. I'll jump in there because I think most recruiters, as you've said, don't truly understand their clients' expectations, and they don't know what good looks like from the client's point of view.
Yeah.
You know what good looks like from our point of view. Yeah. And I think Paul and Dave, you've used the word perceived quite a lot through this conversation. You know, to me, that's a really important word, that we don't actually perceive, or the clients don't actually perceive value in our services. Therefore, it's a hit and miss when it comes proposing new services and increasing our fees. And this is because we're very transactional as a recruiter, and our relationships with our clients are a little bit confused. And I think you've summed it up there, Heather, in the Miller-Hyman approach, is that we have this transactional relationship with a client that we think is a absolute rock bed relationship, when it's not. It's just a basic transactional relationship. And most recruiters think their relationship is far deeper, but when you put that to the test, and the test is usually how many of your best clients invited you into their meeting when they were discussing the headcount for 2024, probably 0 is the answer. That says that they do not trust or value our services. So if we want to be aligned, and very few people are genuinely aligned with their clients, we've got to start align our purpose, our values, and our services in line with their expectations. And therefore, that means we've got to create a deeper relationship, not a transactional one. And therefore, again, pricing doesn't become a conversation. Service is the conversation. And if you provide that quality service, both from a recruitment service and the product that you provide at the end of that service, then price is never an argument, ever.
Exactly.
I think to add to that point, Howard, we always, and we have today, we talk about clients. And my big bugbear, we should talk about individual hiring people within clients.
You're right, Dave.
Yeah, we never control a client. We will have a good relationship with 1 or 2 people. To have a better chance of better negotiation, we need a stronger relationship with more people within the particular client sites. And Anne asked a question earlier, are we seeing it more difficult to get to see clients? And I think that is true. With the advent of Zoom and all the tech we have now, most clients are very happy just to have a Zoom call. But actually, some consultants don't even bother to have a Zoom call with the client. When they take a requirement, they're so happy that they have the requirement, they start working on it. I was on the sales floor last week, and 3 people, 3 of the consultants out of 9, were working on a client they'd never even had a Zoom with. They'd spoken to on the phone, but their success was, I've got the requirement. Not about filling it, they were just delighted to have it. So I was trying to encourage them via their manager to go and see the client, or at least if you can get a Zoom or Teams or whatever, so you can begin to understand, because the chemistry between you and them is really important, because if you've got that and your competitor hasn't, you've got a more chance of getting that over the line.
So if we then move this on, then I always think that recruiters have what I would class as the warmest ankles in the world, because we constantly drop our pants for price. Okay? So in your opinion, then, how flexible should a recruiter be in having to negotiate fees? You know,
I'm
trying to.
from a biology lab.
Yeah, I'm trying to get over that comment. It's quite an introduction.
It's a genuine comment. We drop our pants for fees constantly. You know, it's a race to the bottom for a lot of recruiters. So how flexible should we be in recruiting or negotiating fees? And what factors will you consider when deciding whether to adjust a fee for particular clients or particular assignments?
It's a huge question.
This comes back to the management. How are you rewarding your staff? If you are rewarding them for fees that are really low that you don't make money on, then your consultants are going to do whatever they can do. How are you leading them? How are you managing them? Because reward leads to behavior.
Yes.
And if you have a reward system that doesn't promote or validate lower fees and therefore more cost for your business, then your consultants are more likely, with intelligence and with leadership, to have a more intelligent discussion about fees, and they themselves may walk away and say, well, I'm not going to provide you my good service for that level of fee. I'll go and place them elsewhere.
Which links to something that Howard talks about all the time, which is about differentiating our service. So you can have a cheaper product, but you'll get this level of service.
Agree. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, if you're going to empower them to negotiate fees, which we'll all argue about whether it's a good idea or not, and I think it's probably not. But if you're going to have it, it's got to be fixed to, well, if you're going to pay rock bottom price, you get rock bottom service, and you know, you're getting a Lidl product or a Waitrose product, aren't you? So you know, then I think you can allow people to have a negotiation if it's linked to the product you're delivering. But the idea that it's okay for us to undercut ourselves and not value ourselves, I don't even think we should be letting consultants have that headspace.
Well, I completely agree. Look, it's a broad question because clearly it's complicated. It would depend so much on so many different factors. And you're right, Heather. You know, I used to say to clients, I can do it at any price, but it doesn't mean we're going to find you anybody. You know, I can agree 5% and you'll get nobody from it. It's not a question of what fee we agree. It's based upon the delivery and, as Dave says, our motivation to help. Because if you've got in an applicant short market, you've got one decent candidate or a couple of decent candidates, why would your consultants place those people at 12% when they could place them elsewhere at 22%? It doesn't make any sense. And the client thinks they've won when they've got you at rock bottom fee, but actually they get a lousy service or they get no candidates put forward whatsoever. So what's the point? I think that it's complicated because clearly, when you're talking to clients, it would depend on volume. It would depend upon, as Dave said earlier, about payment terms. It depends on their reaction, how quickly they respond to the emails, CVs you send, their motivation to fill roles, whether it's exclusive, whether it's retained, whether it's contingent. I mean, there are a million elements to this question that need to be addressed. My point would be that I think in many instances, almost all instances, when it comes to fee negotiations and making a decision on what the appropriate fee should be, that's a discussion that should happen internally. I think certainly for bulk opportunities, no one person should ever make a decision. It should be a conversation amongst many to come up with a conclusion, because there's always different views and different attitudes. And the other thing that I wanted to add here is that whatever fee you agree, it shouldn't be something that's set in stone, because we are terrible in our industry of agreeing fees and having no review date on the fee. It just goes on forever. Fees have been agreed 10 years ago. We're still applying the same percentage. What is that all about? We should be putting reviews on it. We'll agree to this for this particular vacancy for 6 months, maybe maximum 1 year, and then we'll review it. But we certainly don't put it out there forever. And that, I'm afraid, happens all of the time. So it's a big question.
So I talk about that an awful lot, Paul, and what Heather's alluded to with regarding supplying services. And I know Natalie Walker's got a hand up, so I'm going to ask Natalie, have you got a question to ask? If just drop that in the chat line, or do you want to come on live and ask the question and suffer the wrath of Paul and Dave and Heather answering the question?
On live, Natalie.
But the question about the services, you're right, Paul. We fix a fee right at the beginning of the conversation, and that fee might be, I want you to recruit a 20 grand person, or I want you to recruit a £10, £15, temp, etc. But then the next job that comes into you is 100 grand perm position, or a £500 a day temp position. But we still use the same pricing structure and the same service structure, where we should be pushing that for difference. And there are other supermarkets available other than Aldi and Lidl, and what you've got to start to think about is they are eating into the market based on price. But if you want a quality product, you will always go somewhere else. Okay. However, a lot of that product, and this is the same with recruitment, a lot of that product is the same product. It's made in the same place. It's just badged up differently. However, when you walk into a different supermarket that is a little bit more customer orientated, it's easier to shop, it's a nicer shopping experience, and therefore you're happy to pay a little bit more money for the same product. And that's the same thing from there. So Natalie's put her hand down, so either she's on a couch and just slightly nudged that button or not, but we'll wait for the question to come. So next question then. What are some innovative approaches or techniques that you've seen successful recruiters use to negotiate fee discussions without causing resistance or objections with clients?
Well, the way I did this back in the day was to write the clauses into the terms and conditions of business that were sent out on a regular basis with every transaction we had with clients. In other words, we made it very clear, if people bothered to read the terms, that temp charges, for example, would be reviewed annually and would rise every year in accordance with the average rate of inflation determined by the retail price index. Now, every year we increase where we could. Sometimes we were obviously tied into agreements, so we couldn't just go ahead willy-nilly and increase. But for transactional business, we simply increased the charges and then waited for response. And in the main, people didn't respond. When they did, we would have a very sensible conversation and come to an agreement with them. But the terms and conditions were there in our standard terms that they've received every time they used a temporary. And the same applied to permanents. We annually reviewed our permanent terms and conditions of business. We looked at the percentages and had conversations. But more importantly, we had in writing every single time we agreed a fee with a client that it was, and there was an email that went out and it was documented on the CRM, that this particular fee was for this vacancy only, or it was for 3 months, or it was 6 months, or maximum a year. And we had review dates inset into our diaries, and we arranged meetings to have conversations about whether we would continue on those fee levels, increase them, or even decrease them for potentially better volume business. In other words, we didn't lock ourselves into these things forever and a day. And I think that's the most important point. You have to be very disciplined about these discussions, and that's not difficult to understand. Have a look at any contract we enter into on a personal basis. Go and do a deal with any of the mobile phone companies or a gas electric, and you'll find that these contracts we sign are not forever.
I think you're right. We should have some automatic increases, especially on temp books. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't automatically do it. And certainly my experience of doing that was that nobody ever batted an eyelid.
Heather, I'm amazed at how many consultants don't know what their agency's fee structure is.
Yeah, you're right.
They just don't know. Even though they've been trained, even though they're on board, they're there and they're kind of just going with it. And if the client says, well, it's 15%, but your standard terms are 17, they're going, well, the client said 15, I'll take 15 because I need the work.
Yeah,
they just don't know, and that's down to us as leaders not telling them that actually this is quite an important part. And to Howard's point, one of the best ones I've seen is because most of the clients that a lot of our companies deal with are smaller clients. They aren't the big Ford and Centrica, whatever it is. They're not those. They're smaller ones. Is have a different fee for the role. So if you're looking for this engineer, there's 182 available in the within a 50-mile radius. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can use your CRM and LinkedIn to find out. You can inform the client and say, for that reason, this fee is 18.5%, and it doesn't have to be a flat fee. It doesn't have to be 18. It can be 18.25. It can be 18.75. It shows that you've thought about the value that you're giving. And you can have 18.75 for one role, and 15.25 for another, and 20 for another, and 25 for search. But the more you have, the more negotiation that you've got with the client. If you start at 15 or 18, that's it. It's difficult to move.
So I think Natalie and Mark have come into that part of that question, which is, you're right, people do not know their fee structure. People don't know their terms and conditions, and therefore they're not trading. And I remember, back in 2008, when the market was really on its knees, we compartmentalized our wholesale. So we put a percentage to every single part of the recruitment process. And then we went out to clients and said, right, okay, let's tick off what you want. And so we'd asked them what they want. We ticked it off and said, right, okay, according to our calculations, that's now a 22% fee. And they went, oh, how come? We showed them the fee calculator, how it was calculated. And they went, oh, right, okay, but I really want that bit. Yeah, well, you really want that bit, but if you want me to drop it to 15%, I'm going to have to remove that and that. And all of a sudden they could start to see value, because you were starting to actually break down your services and break down the cost of your service. And so if we were giving something away, we would always get something back. And so if we were negotiating and dropping our fee, we'd want either exclusivity, or we want longer contracts, or we want something in that we'd always get back. And it all boils down to not knowing what you've got to negotiate with and what you've got on the table. And I think that's really important from a recruiter. So last question. Considering the evolving sort of recruitment landscape, how important is it for agencies to continually reassess and potentially adjust their fee structure?
Howard, just before I answer that question, I've got a class coming in here in 4 minutes.
You better be quick then, Dave. You better be quick.
So I'm going to sign off, because there's people at the door wondering what I'm doing. So I'll see you all next week. I'm going to go.
Be careful of the Bunsen burner.
Cheers, Dave. Don't get
also, Howard, we have got a question in the Q&A section as well. So
right, okay, yeah, I'll get to that. Yeah.
See you, Dave. To answer this question, it's vital to consistently and continually reassess and potentially adjust fee structures. It's vital. If we're evolving our service offerings and we are consistently talking to clients, being in front of them, having conversations, what's Dave up to? Having conversations with our clients to understand their requirements, then we also have to consider fee adjustments that are reflective of the services and support that our clients require from us. Not least in businesses, costs are going up, they don't go down. We need to consider how we're going to keep our heads above water as far as margins are concerned. It's also, I think, down to, and I think we alluded to this point earlier, what kind of people our clients want. If they're easy to find and we have them in high volume, then there's probably less of an opportunity to be charging a bit more. But where we are being asked for people that have got specific skill sets that are difficult to find, then yes, we should be charging at premium rates. There are so many differentials to take into consideration. It's something that needs to be reviewed, as I said earlier, on every occasion we talk to clients. It's certainly something that we need to embed into our terms, and it's something that we need to be very clear about with our own people, making sure they're well trained and making certain that they feel comfortable with the terms and conditions. But it's a big question, Howard. We don't really have the time to address this quite the way that I think I would like to, but I certainly think that it's an absolute imperative.
Yeah, it has to be normalized. So it has to be an absolutely key part of every conversation we have when we're building relationships with clients. All the time is the short answer.
So I'm going to try sort of put my answer in, and also there's been a question coming from an anonymous attendee. Some clients are highly resistant to increasing and allude to that they will go elsewhere if you do not align with what they want. Also, a new client ringing round agencies tend to go with the most competitive, and the business may be lost. How do you navigate that? Well, if they're looking for the bottom price, I would walk away. That's how I would negotiate with that one. And if it's your client is highly resistant to a price increase, you have to understand why. And I think this is about this question here about, how important is it to continually assess your potential of adjusting your fees? It's not the adjusting your fees, it's adjusting your service that leads to the fee, I think is the first thing that we start to review. And therefore you start to look at the data that you've got. So you look at your fee structure, you look at your time to fill, you look at the average time to fill, you look at how many candidates you've got in that marketplace, and you start to link that back to your capability and capacity of filling the jobs with your clients. There's no point taking a job on if you can't fill the job and you haven't got the capacity to fill that job, because you're just alluding to your lack of capability. Hence why our prices keep dropping, because we take so many jobs on that we never ever fill. So I think we've got to start to walk away a little bit more and be a little bit more proud of our service. And I think I use this Warren Buffett comment at the end just purely because I think it's a great comment. The single most important decision about valuing your business is pricing power. If you've got the power to raise your prices without losing business to a competitor, you have a very good business. And if you have to have a prayer session before rising your prices by 10%, then you've got a terrible business. And I think that's a really powerful quote. If you're fearful that your client is demanding money from you, i.e. reducing your costs, then walk away, because they don't value your service. Go find someone who actually values your service and wants to work with you. But you've got to understand that you've got to get deeper into the client relationship and further down the relationship line to be able to have the client change their perception of recruitment and then perceive the value that you are offering. And if it looks like everybody else is offering, then they're never going to perceive the value. So you've got to work constantly at your service, and that allows you then to continually readjust your fee structure. And I said earlier, we constantly have the same fee, but for multiple different roles in multiple different sectors, because we don't think about it as a one-off fee. We think about, oh, that's fine, but we're too afraid then to go back to the client and re-challenge the client. That should be a retained job. That should be this. That should be that. You've got no chance of finding that. Actually, I could do that contingency. Absolutely, I could, because I've got 45 candidates on my database available right now to do that. Okay, that is a retained job. We're going to have to spend some time and quality time searching for the candidate, etc., etc. And we've got to take that. So we've got to take what I think is what we all say. We talk about the passive marketplace, but we don't understand what our clients' recruitment fall is, i.e. what you're going to recruit in January, February, March, April, May, June, July. If we knew what was coming further down the line, then we could actually get into the passive marketplace and give them the best candidates on the market, not the best candidates in the market today. And that's a huge difference. And I think then you can start to negotiate your rate up rather than negotiate it down.
And you make a great point there, Howard, that in the end, it comes down to, if you've got the candidates and you have a business that attracts the best candidates with the right skill sets that your clients are looking for, you're always in a position of control. Where you do not have that magnetism for candidates, you're always going to be in the opposite place. So, I mean, knowing how to attract great candidates and knowing how to market those candidates will give you a level of control and power.
So one of the things that you need to do then as data is, I would be looking at individual roles and looking what's the average tenure in the UK for those roles. And therefore I'd be able to market to my database of candidates 6 months, 9 months before their average tenure comes up, about looking for a job, how to find a new job, are you looking for a change, etc., etc. So you're right, inviting those people to come to you, and therefore you have candidates coming to you that you can then take to your marketplace if you know when the clients need it, rather than eyes down recruitment, waiting for your clients to give you the job today that they want filling tomorrow, but they planned that job 6 months ago. So I think it's important that we start to look at that as a service rather than as a thing. So think about, your higher up you get within a car. When you buy a car, they ring you up and say your car's ready for service. We're noticing that this is now happening on your car. You need to bring it in. This is under warranty. We can do this free. But whilst we're doing it, we can also do this, this, and this. And so they make you spend money without you even realizing you're spending money. And that's all about their services. And that's what we've got to get into. We've got to get to better service. Can we bring candidates to clients before the client realizes that they need that candidate, even though it's down on their growth plan or their people plan for that year? So that's it for this week. Heather, Paul, thank you very much. Dave's obviously now in detention somewhere. He'll be writing lines on the board. I must not pinch this classroom. Next week, we're going to talk about exactly what we've talked about today, but in a slightly different. Are you innovating, or are you just doing the same as always? So it's going to be a very, very big conversation about your services and what your service levels are like, and how you can eke more pricing and a better, deeper relationship with your clients by offering a better and more qualified service. So, ladies and gents, thanks very much for your time. It's been much appreciated. I look forward to seeing you all next week. If you've got any questions, send them in to us. We look forward to speaking to you again next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.